Thank you for coming today. I want to talk to you about a project I've done to save energy, and the full details can be found on my blog, so you can look at the link. It's a rush, kind of have to rush through this because it's a lot of information, so you'll have to check out the full PowerPoint on the blog. My project was to save money and save energy, and so the project I chose was if I were to bike in a 2-mile radius of my house instead of drive, how much money would I save? How much time and energy would I save? So I did that. You got to know that I live in Sitka, Alaska, which is a small coastal town. There's a lot of salt in the air. It's very corrosive on bikes and on cars. But also, I live very close to work, and I live very close to the store. So I don't need to, I live within a mile of each of those things, so I can take my bike. And being on the coast, it rains a whole lot, so you got to dress for the weather. So obviously, if you take a car is more comfortable than a bike. It saves time, but it costs money. And the costs I've figured is it costs me. These cost analyses are basically for my own car and for my life. And know that I do everything as cheap as possible. I will work on my own vehicle. I do maintenance regularly. I have a cheap car. You know, one of the doors doesn't work, but it still drives. So I have a cheap car, and also the insurance is as cheap as possible too. So I save as much money as possible, and I found that my yearly cost for just having a car parked outside where I can drive is $1,300. And then the cost of gas with the cost of maintenance, because that depends on how far you drive, it comes to figuring about 45 cents a mile. So it's $1,300 plus 45 cents a mile. With a bike, it just takes more time, the expense is less. I figured it costs about $350 a year to bike. That includes maintenance, that includes rain gear, and that includes the cost of the bike. So is biking worth it? You save money, and you get exercise, but the disadvantage is it takes longer and you have to be in the elements. The assumption is that saving money is good and that saving time is good, and also that it is important for a healthy lifestyle to exercise 3 times a week for 20 minutes. So how I did this experiment is the first week I drove everywhere. I charted where I drove, I clocked how long it took, and the distance to the 1/10 of a mile. And then the next week I biked everywhere within the 2-mile radius. I found that I biked about 75% of the time. Meaning I didn't leave that 2-mile radius for 75% of the time. And if I needed to go out of the radius, then I drove my car. So there is some cost. So the findings that I found while driving, it cost me a total of just the expense on the car, the gas and the maintenance was $21.35. The average rate, I went about 16 miles an hour. It's a small town with lots of stops. And it equaled to about, every mile took me about 3 minutes and 45 seconds to travel. So that doesn't count scraping ice or starting your car or anything like that. But also, with the time, you got to figure in, I didn't get any exercise, so you add an hour in of exercise, and your grand total is more than 2 hours. It's closer to 3 or 4 hours. The biking week, I found that I traveled 37 miles by bike and 16 by car outside of that radius, and so I spent $7.56 that week. My rate was about 11 miles an hour, and that includes putting on rain gear. So every time I leave the house for a trip, I have to put on rain gear and take it off. So that includes a minute of each trip of putting on rain gear, which it's an average time because sometimes you don't have to put on the rain gear. So that's an average time. And I exercised for 2 hours and 50 minutes on the bike. So my findings were that by biking, I saved an average of $17.50. and I averaged the 2 weeks. I averaged the week of driving distance and the week of biking distance, the total distances, and also the distances over 2 miles. So these are average findings of both weeks. So I did the average and found that I saved $17.46 of money. Driving, actually, once you figure in exercise time for the weeks, it only saved me 22 minutes. And exercising, I got 3 times the amount of exercise when I biked. So if I took the averages, and did it for a whole year, my findings were that I would have biked 2,000 miles, and I would have only driven 614 miles. So my yearly cost, which would be the $1,300 to own the car, having it sit there, multiplied by the miles that I traveled times 45 cents, and my total yearly cost, if I did this for a whole year, would be $1,576. So what does this mean? It means that if I did it for a whole year, I would save $900 in gas. And the price of fuel I counted on as a fixed price. I know it fluctuates, but I fixed the price when I started the experiment, which was $4.38 a gallon. And I saved 207 gallons of gas. If I did it for 10 years, of course, multiply it by 10, I would save $9,000 and 2,070 gallons. And if I convinced 10 of my friends to do this, and we all did it for 10 years, we would save a total of $90,000 and 20,000, or closer to 21,000 gallons of gas. So again, my figures were based. I found that I only traveled outside of the radius about 23% of the time. And if I did this process for a lifestyle, I would own a bike and a car. So I'd have to pay the maintenance for the bike, and the cost of owning a bike, and the cost of a car. So to do both, it costs a little bit, but I'm saving money on gas and maintenance. So it's pretty interesting. So be a conscious consumer. And just for fun, I imagined if I just had a bike, it would cost me $350 a year total. And if I just drove, it would cost me about $2,600, $2,650 a year. So the difference is $2,300 to own a car. So if there's some charts, but if you average it out, what this means is that based on about a 3,000 mile traveling per year, which is about what I'd do in this town, it would cost about $2,300 to travel those miles, which means that for biking, every mile I travel would save me about 76 cents. And that means in biking, if I were to bike everywhere, you have the average rate of 11 miles an hour, and then multiply that by 0.76, and it comes to I'm saving about $8.51 an hour. So that's pretty interesting. This, I think, is very helpful for people who live in a community where it's small and tight, and especially for kids on college campuses thinking about all the money they could save by biking, and plus it's good exercise. So be a conscious consumer, know what you're getting into, and be good to your resources. So thank you for coming, and thank you for listening.